See if we're gonna be found not guilty or whatever it is. So we'll get right to this video. Once again, I appreciate y'all for hanging in here, and that's real talk.
It's a line of
Let me back it up just a little tad bit.
trade $10. KAL trial. So really the only way you're going to be able to get insight on this case is if you follow along with us here on the case as well as with Court TV's Cody Thomas. So let's start with how this day started. And I want you to look at this drone video. We shot this outside the courthouse. This is before opening statements, and there was a line of people here in Collin County. It's outside Dallas. We think there was roughly 200 people outside the courthouse trying to get in to see this trial take place. And there's just 27 spots in the court. Now, before we get to what prosecutors and defense attorneys argued in their opening statements, we need to talk about this jury. Look, there is no question that race is one of the elements that has made this story the center of a lot of attention, on top of the fact that you have a young man who lost his life at a track. And the racial makeup of this jury is definitely something getting attention here.
All
this
white.
jury,
All white jury.
we're told
Make that make sense.
one Middle Eastern woman,
All white.
and a woman of color, but reportedly, no African Americans are on this jury, and the rest of the
Good
jury
question.
is made up of white men. Now, according to local report, 3 African American women were stricken from the jury, claiming they had bias in the case, claiming they didn't want to convict Carmelo Anthony. Now, the court went through more than 600 potential jurors in the selection process, and one question we are told hung up a lot of people was whether they could convict a teenager and put him away for life. Now, Carmelo Anthony is that teenager, and he is charged with first-degree murder in the death of another teen named Austin Metcalf. And we have not seen Anthony on the outside of the courthouse as we did when he posted bond last year. The road surrounding the courthouse has been blocked off, and it does appear that Carmelo is being brought into court away from cameras. Again, very strict rules when it comes to this trial by the judge. We can't film inside the courthouse. We can't film the trial. We can't live stream it. So we just have the words of the people who are witnessing it for themselves, like Cody. Now, prosecutors dropped some new information today, and it's information we didn't know until the opening statements began. And before we get to that, I want to lay out for you the timeline. And I'm going to lay out this timeline using the perspectives of the prosecution and the defense. So all of this took place last year on April 2nd. And it was at a track meet for local high schools in Frisco, Texas. And you have Austin Metcalf's high school and Carmelo Anthony's high school. Those were 2 of the schools competing in this track meet. Everything changes when a rainstorm moves into the area, and it delayed this track meet. So everybody's going to maybe back to their bus, maybe they're going to a tent underneath. And Carmelo's high school did not have a tent, but Austin Metcalf's high school did. And Carmelo ducks under the tent of Austin Metcalf's high school. Now, this is where the versions of events are very different between the prosecution and the defense. So you have the prosecution who says that Metcalf's team told Carmelo Anthony to leave from being under the tent, and Carmelo wouldn't move. And the defense says that the reason that Carmelo went to the tent is because he had recognized a close family friend of his girlfriend. Now, the defense says that once Austin Metcalf and his twin brother noticed Carmelo, they told him to leave, and Carmelo was just confused as to why it was a big deal that he was under the tent. Now, the prosecution says that when Carmelo was asked to leave the tent, he said something along the lines of "make me." When Austin Metcalf stepped up to Carmelo to tell him to leave, they end up having some words, and that's when Carmelo Anthony allegedly stabs Austin Metcalf in the chest. And a big piece of information that is new information to us related to the alleged murder weapon. Prosecutors say
Once again, I do not own the rights to this videos, entertainment, educational purposes only. I don't get to the point
that the knife was ready, and they say that Carmelo Anthony was looking for a reason to use it. They characterize what happened as Carmelo baiting Austin Metcalf into a confrontation. Now, the defense side of it, again, is very different from what the prosecution.
Once again, you see how they already trying to convict this brother already. Already. They're trying to convict this brother. Easily just saying, like, he just walking around with this knife just out. Just, I'm ready to stab somebody. Come on, man. This is ridiculous. That's how they do it though.
saying, they are arguing that Carmelo was acting in self-defense. They say that Austin Metcalf was the aggressor. They say that Austin made the first physical contact with Carmelo. Carmelo had to react in a moment of chaos, and he used knife to protect himself. So after the stabbing, Carmelo ran. The prosecution argues that the fact that he drops the knife and he takes off, it proves guilt. They also say that he tried to allegedly blend in with the crowd when people went looking for him. The defense, they say that Carmelo ran because he was defending himself, that he was trying to get out of the situation.
Yes, man.
And they say that he went to one of his coaches until police arrived. Now, once police arrived, Carmelo is quoted as saying, quote, "I'm not alleged, I did it." And prosecutors say that proves that Carmelo knew what he did. They also say that Carmelo said, quote, "I told him not to," when speaking about Austin Metcalf. And they say that also shows that Carmelo wasn't afraid for his life, but Carmelo, they argue, murdered Austin Metcalf. Now, the defense, they look at the sequence of defense a little different. They say that the fact that Carmelo said, "I'm not alleged, I did it," that doesn't prove anything. They say, if anything, it shows that he wasn't hiding the fact that he was involved in this altercation and then he had to do it because it was self-defense. Now, of course, the big question that was raised by prosecutors right out of the gate this morning is, I think, a question that hangs over this trial. And it's, why does a 17-year-old kid competing at a high school track meet, middle of the week, why does he need to bring a knife with him? Now, we'll talk about how the defense may address that in a moment. The defense, at the start of their opening statements today, they took the approach of trying to paint Carmelo Anthony not as a killer, but telling the jury that he's a good kid. This is a guy who was voted captain of his football team. He's someone who has never been in trouble with the law. He works multiple jobs. He enjoys playing chess. He enjoys going camping. They say that he is not the monster that prosecutors are alleging that he is. Now, witness testimony is going to be a driving force behind this trial. But also today, prosecutors showed surveillance video of the incident. Cody Thomas of Court TV was in the courtroom today for all of the testimony. Cody, I know that there's a 911 call that was played that we'll talk about, some very emotional testimony at the end of the day. But I want to begin right after opening statements. Surveillance video of this incident was shown. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Chris, it was 5 different angles surveillance video. Looked like the cameras were on like the light post inside the high school football stadium because they were very wide shots. So the first witness was a forensic video analyst who obviously went through and tried to enhance the video. We watched the original videos first, and quite frankly, you really couldn't see much of anything. And then after a few minutes, we zoomed in, he showed all the enhancements, and he had spot shadowing and highlighting who we're supposed to be looking at. You can't really make out any distinct features, and the prosecution admitted that before they even played the video. They had to look at clothing and identify the person of interest, who, of course, is Carmelo Anthony, and the victim, who is Austin Metcalf. So they outlined all of that based on the photos that came out later once Carmelo was taken into custody. But again, the videos, it establishes what happened. You can definitely make out what happened, but it wasn't, to me personally, as compelling as I thought it would be, because it looks like gas station video. It's really grainy. It's zoomed in. When it's zoomed out, it looks high quality. But when it zooms in, as you know, with any picture, it loses some of the quality. But you can see the tent where everything goes down. You see Carmelo Anthony walk under the tent 2 minutes before Austin Metcalf and his friends get to the tent. And then everything starts going down within 4.5 minutes. You see, just kind of some humanoid blobs under the yellow Memorial High School tent. And then you see one figure kind of jolt, really fast jolts to and from, which they were saying, the prosecution was saying that was the initial push. They're not denying that Austin Metcalf, made physical contact. They admitted that there was a physical altercation, but that was the moment you saw the push. And then, of course, you see the 25, 30 kids start scattering throughout the bleachers. And then you see the person of interest, again, Carmelo Anthony, running down the bleachers, running a ways away from where the tent was, out onto the track and into the arms of another coach, Chris. But again, the video, of course, establishing, giving us, painting a picture of what it looked like that morning. This all happened around 10:02 in the morning, right when the track meet was supposed to start. Just really giving us a scene setter, just to allow us to understand what was really going down that day.
And we don't have cameras in the courtroom, as we've said. I mean, and I know things got emotional near the end of the day. And we'll talk about some of these witnesses here in a moment, some of these coaches that witnessed what happened. They witnessed the aftermath. But what's the layout of the courtroom? Like, what does, what was Carmelo Anthony's, what did he seem like as all of this was going on today?
So I'm positioned right behind the Metcalf family. So it's a very small courtroom, Chris. Only seats about 60, 65 people. Each side, each family gets 15 people each. So that's 30. You have 9 of us media people. That's 39. And then plus court staff. So about 45 seats already taken up before members of the public can get inside, which that only allow for 25. I think the exact number this morning is 27 members of the public who are allowed to come in. But of course, you have the Metcalf family on one side, the Carmelo Anthony camp on another side, and I'm watching Carmelo during all of these videos, all of the emotional testimony from the different coaches and witnesses. Because I mean, at the end of the day, he stabbed the kid to death. Whether it's proven to be self-defense, whether it's proven to be murder, whether it's manslaughter, there you still took a human life. And I'm looking at him, and he was kind of stoic. He wasn't really emotional. He was watching the videos. He didn't turn away from the videos. But I'm looking at Austin Metcalf's family, and his father, is fully engaged and everything, but every so often, every 10 to 15 minutes, his father would just kind of put his head in his hands like this, and I'd see him nod his head no, just of course overwhelming emotion there. But I'm looking back and forth trying to gauge the dynamics between both of them, between the alleged aggressor and the victim here. And there was stoicism on this side and clear emotion on the Metcalf side, as expected.
Yeah, I mean, you just think of the weight of everything we're talking about, and even the possibility for Carmelo Anthony that he could be sent to prison for the rest of his life. That's and it's something where we cover these trials. You just think of the weight of everything that's going on, and of course for these families and what's going through their minds as all of this is going on. Um, the testimony of some of the coaches who were there, who were witnesses, it seems like this is where things got really emotional today. What, as you kind of reflect back, and I know you just stepped out of court and you're probably still processing everything you heard over several hours, but I mean, when you think of the moment today of where things got emotional, what would be that moment for you?
The moment for me, Chris, was we had several coaches and athletic trainers. They were all at the meet that day, all from different schools. Some of them, knew of each other just because coaches in the same district. All of them had different, unique perspectives as to what happened, how they participated in aiding Austin, where they were when they heard the commotion go down. But for me, Chris, it was this last witness before I came out of the courtroom. Now, a coach named Joshua Redmond, who was a defensive coordinator, track coach, football and track, they kind of coincide in high school sports. He was there at the track meet with Liberty High School, whose tent was only about 20 feet from Memorial High School, where the whole stabbing went down. And it was established at the beginning of his testimony that he was a 14-year combat Iraq vet, that he did 3 tours in Iraq, and he's seen death. He's a 100% disabled veteran. He's told the court that he's been blown up 3 times, twice in a Humvee, once in a house. So he's seen, carnage before.
Yeah.
So he talks about he was standing there talking to another coach, and he wasn't hearing anything. And all of a sudden, it was just, I mean, he goes over there, he realizes what's happened. He has no relationship with the Metcalf family at all. He only knows the Metcalf twins through the schools playing football and pressure to the wound. And he says he sees, the color draining from Austin's face, and eventually starts seeing his eyes roll back. So while that all sounds emotional, Chris, this is the part that got me. Because he's seen death before, this coach who was a more than a decade combat vet, the kid Austin, he stops breathing at some point in time. They lose a pulse, so he's back there doing the CPR, doing the chest compressions. Another coach is doing the mouth to mouth, and so he's clearly not breathing. And one coach is on 911 on the phone with 911, and then he starts talking about the type of breathing that many of us refer to as your last breaths. And he's looking up at the coach that's on the phone with 911. He's looking down at the kid, passing away here, and those breaths start to come. Those last breaths start to happen. And the coach on the phone with 911 is like, oh, he's breathing again. He's breathing again. But the coach Redmond, who was on the stand, says he knew that was it because he's heard the last breaths before. He knew those weren't the normal breaths of someone who's kind of struggling or straining to breathe. He knew those were the last moments. And he said he didn't say anything because he didn't want to kill, the morale and the hope. Everyone's hoping, you can hear on the 911 call him saying, stay with me, Austin, stay with me. Come on, you're here, everything's fine. But he said even when he was doing those compressions, he heard those last breaths. He just knew it was over. And when you hear that, coupled with the 911 call, Chris, that was the most emotional moment for me right before walking out of this courtroom just a few moments ago.
Yeah, I mean, I just like reading the notes of the day of like what happened. Like I got chills just reading it. You know, you just think of the chaos of the moment and the fact that this was a high school track meet, and suddenly you have a combat war veteran trying to save the life of a young man who had just been stabbed. Um, what did the jury look like? In all of this, because I just think of the idea of this 911 call playing and just the description of Austin, stay with me, and to hear that chaos, like when things got emotional, what did the jury look like?
So, of course, you had throughout the day, some of this testimony is going on. The jury's mixed, kind of evenly split between men and women. And of course, you have the people who are just kind of shaking their heads, closing their eyes, maybe looking away. But when I saw real emotion, where tissue had to be handed out to some of the men on the jury, no less as well, Chris, was during that 911 call. It went on for maybe 10 or 12 minutes. You heard the other coach, Coach Thayer, who wasn't a witness, but his name was established. He's on the phone, and we got a kid that just been stabbed. They're saying it was another student from another school. They don't know him, but it wasn't really what was being said by the coach who was on the phone with the operators. What you could hear in the background, all the shouting, again, all the "Come on, Austin, stay with me." And there was a point in time, Chris, when you can literally hear the rhythmic chest compression. You can just the voice of whoever was talking. You can just hear it against the bleachers, and I looked over at the jury, and you see a couple of two or three men wiping their eyes. Of course, like some of the women were had their face in their hands, tears were falling. Not visceral crying to where it's audible, but you can see the emotion was definitely running throughout that jury as they were watching.
Yeah, and I just think of the defense, part of this as well, because there is no question about the fact that Carmelo Anthony stabbed Austin Metcalf. The question is, was this murder? For a lot of these cross examinations today, where you would have the emotional testimony of what people witnessed, like how would you characterize how the defense is going about kind of trying to weather the storm of
This is
so much
crazy.
emotion coming from what Carmelo Anthony allegedly did to Austin Metcalf?
Yeah, Chris, the defense didn't really attack as aggressively as I thought they would during this emotional testimony, which can be looked at in a positive or a negative way, depending on how you look at it, on what kind of defense you're on. But one of the questions that the defense attorney asked every single witness, we're talking about the tents. And a lot of these coaches, being coaches in competitive sports and being in the culture of track and field, they were talking about track and field culture, how each tent is kind of like your locker room. For example, if you're in the NBA or the NFL, you have two locker rooms, and players don't go back and forth between each other's locker rooms. And they were trying to explain that the tents were kind of the same thing. You might walk by and see your friend that you say, "Hey, what's up?" But you're not hanging out under the tents. But what the defense kept harping on with each witness, the whole idea of the
They try to do anything to justify
down
trying to convict his brother with this all white jury. Make that make sense, though. That's the problem.
stuff that day. And he kept saying that to each witness. Did you know the Centennial High School did not have a tent? And they were, no, I
What tent's got to do with anything?
Then he would follow up saying,
Man put his hands on it. It's a cause and effect to everything.
That's a fair assessment. No one wants to get drenched. I don't, that he asked that question pertinently with every single witness. I understand the generality of the question, but I don't know what that question has to do with a first degree murder charge. But other than that, Chris, he didn't really harp on anything in an aggressive manner with any of this emotional testimony going on here today.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because it was constantly noted like track and field culture, about these tents, and maybe talking about like why Carmelo Anthony was there, and then what led to a confrontation as to why Austin Metcalf really wanted Carmelo Anthony out from under that tent. One witness that stood out to me, I think his name is Vincent Cooper, and he was another coach. He's the head football coach, and a lot of these coaches coach track, of course, at Heritage High School. And he was someone who was with Carmelo Anthony right after all of this happened. There's no question after Anthony allegedly stabs Austin Metcalf, he runs. And the question is, was he running because he knew what he did and that it was murder and he was trying to flee? Or was it a situation where he was defending himself and he was just trying to get away from the situation? What stood out to you about what Vincent Cooper had to say as far as what Carmelo Anthony was doing just in the moments after he had stabbed Austin Metcalf?
So before we talk Hooper, Chris, we got to establish the moments before Carmelo got to Hooper.
Yeah.
And that was the coach that was testifying before Hooper took the stand. And all these coaches, by the way, are from different schools. But she was an athletic trainer, one of the girls' coaches with another opposing school's track and field team. She was saying, where she wasn't sure the commotion.
But they
she
definitely
had-
fixed, and there's some bus about that. They fixed this thing to try to convict this brother because his little arrogant ass
There, he stabbed Austin.
Clay kid want to try to jump out there and bully somebody. That's exactly what happened.
Says whatever she says to him, and Carmelo stops. And as soon as she stops, Coach Hooper's right there, and she looks to Coach Hooper saying, "They said he stabbed this kid, Austin Metcalf. Don't let Carmelo Anthony leave." So Hooper's like, "Well, what do you mean stab?" He's flustered. He said he didn't even register what was really going on. He heard the commotion. He saw his students running, and they're saying the stabbing thing, but he said it just wasn't really computing in his head. So he looked to Carmelo Anthony, who was standing right next to him, and he
You're
said,
right about that. I agree with you, brother. 110%.
Hooper said, he looked at him and said, "You stabbed someone, son?" And then Carmelo responds to him, "He put his hands on me. He put his hands on me. Yeah, I stabbed him." And Hooper says he looked at him and told him, "Well, if that kid dies, your whole life changes today." And then he said, Carmelo looked back at him and said, "Well, he's not going to die." And then Hooper said, "Okay, but if he does," and Hooper said before he could even finish, Carmelo started crying and they just continued to walk. And Coach Hooper said that he felt that Carmelo's emotions were genuine. He said he didn't feel that they were some kind of fabrication. I mean, he was literally crying moments after what happened. So it was kind of this intimate moment he was describing. And, you're looking at a 17-year-old kid who just made the biggest mistake of his life here. So that really stood out to me, Chris, just the intimacy of what he was talking about. He just walking with this kid whose life clearly has changed in the last year since April 2025.
Yeah, and to think again, like what his reality may be if this is a guilty verdict. Of course, it's only day one of this trial of Carmelo Anthony facing a charge of first-degree murder. Cody Thomas from Court TV, just an amazing job today. I know those are long hours in there following every single detail, but it's great for us because of course we can't have cameras in the courtroom to see it for. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
That's how it is, and that's real cool.
Presented by